Far beyond the fields we know, and low in the darkness, there was thunder, and racing behind it the roaring voice, "Hear me, the old king is gone." Today on the Comic Book Report, Thor by Cates and Klein Omnibus from Marvel Comics. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm back to do another Marvel Omnibus review, courtesy of our friends at Organic Price Books. A huge thank you to them over there. But yes, today we're going to be looking at Thor by Cates and Klein. Now, transparently, this was a run that hit my radar largely because I was such a huge fan of Donny Cates' run on Venom. That was actually my favorite book I read, I believe, last year. At any rate, I was on the lookout for more Marvel runs from Donny Cates, and this one definitely looked interesting to me. And at any rate, I have finished the book now, and I cannot wait to talk about it today. Before we begin the review, though, I do want to shout out the channel's sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, perhaps even this very book, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link to them in the video's description, and if you see anything on their website you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to continue to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's Marvel Omnibus review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The comics in this volume were written by Donny Cates, Torunn Grønbekk, Al Ewing, and more, with art from Nick Klein, Martin Cuculo, and more. The comics in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2020. As far as what this omnibus includes, this volume collects Thor, the 2020 series, issues 1 through 35, Hulk vs. Thor, Banner of War Alpha, Hulk, the 2021 series, issues 7 and 8, Thanos Death Notes, and material from Thor Annual 2021, issue 1, and Thor Annual 2023, issue 1. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover edition with beautiful glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 1,048 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first dedicated look at the front cover for the dust jacket of today's omnibus. And right from the top, I should say this is the standard edition cover for this release. I'll throw up a quick thumbnail of the direct market option as well, so people can see both cover options for this release and make the best determination for themselves. I personally am in favor of this standard edition cover, where we have Thor as the herald. I just think it's a really striking image, and I really dig it. Transitioning to the spine, we of course have the Marvel Omnibus logo, and then we have a field of kind of that purplish skyline with a lightning strike. I really like that it's kind of retained from the front cover. We have the stylized font for Thor, and then by Cates and Klein, and an image of Thor at the bottom there. I do think for the direct market cover, there might be a different image on the bottom of the spine as well, so that's just something to note for collectors out there. On the back cover of the dust jacket, we have an awesome, striking image of Thor with really bold font up top, "Heavy lies the hammer." I really like that. I think it sets the tone quite well. We have descriptions about the book, a couple reviews, what the volume contains, pricing information, really all of your standard fare for a dust jacket back cover. Overall, I really like the graphic design here. I think the back cover is striking, to say the least. Okay, and now that we've finished that quick look at the dust jacket, I did want to spend an additional minute to do one final examination of that very dust jacket. This time, though, I'll show the interior flaps as well. While we do have a lot of text on those interior flaps, we are treated to some bonus artwork here, which is always nice to see. And as always, I do want to do a full spread of the dust jacket so you can see it all at a glance. Again, this is the standard edition cover, so the direct market will have a different front cover of the dust jacket and possibly bottom image on the spine. fine. Otherwise, these books should be identical. Now, transitioning to the hardback book itself, we do have a great wraparound image lifted directly from these comics. I think that this was a fantastic choice for the Under the Dust Jacket hardcover art. Having a wraparound image like this, seeing Thor and a lot of other cool images, it's really, really interesting. I think they did a great job pulling this image, and I think the book itself just looks really unique. I mean, just look at all the colors here. It pops right off the book, and I love that they decided to go for the wraparound. I just think it is a really fun book. Obviously, as you just saw, we don't have any text on the hardback book itself. We don't have any words on the spine or anything like that, but we do have an uninterrupted image, which I, again, think was a cool choice. And now for all you prospective buyers out there, a quick look at this volume's binding. So as I mentioned, this is a sewn binding, and this is after one full read-through of this omnibus. As you can see, my edition has a little bit of an eye, not a huge one, but gutter loss was really not a factor for me. I mean, a tiny, tiny bit, but again, anything I needed, I could easily see, especially when pushing down the pages in a couple cases, but of course you could take a look as I flip through as well. And speaking of that flip through, it is finally time to dive into today's omnibus. So after some really nice end pages, we have a beautiful title page, and then we have a double spread creator breakdown publication information page. This is what we have in lieu of a proper table of contents. We have a mapping of all of the issues included, their respective creators, but we don't really have a page numbered table of contents. This isn't too uncommon with a modern Marvel run, but worth noting. After that, we are treated to an introduction by series writer Donny Cates, which I love to see as well. We got an introduction from him on the aforementioned Venom run in that omnibus, so this was a real treat. I love to hear him kind of tee off why Thor was an important character for him and how the kind of fantasy and just interest in Thor was retained even while being in the industry. Really a fun introduction, but after that we dive right into the first issue of his run. And now I should set the stage a little bit for those wondering, when does this run take place? Well, I'm glad you asked this hypothetical question. This Thor comic run by Donny Cates and Nick Klein follows immediately after the run on Thor by Jason Aaron, which was itself collected in a 2-volume omnibus set. Now that really does shift the status quo for Thor and his supporting cast of characters, but you really get brought up to speed rather quickly. In fact, within the first issue, you have the major shift already addressed, and here it is. Now Thor is the king of Asgard. He has taken the role from his father Odin, who has kind of opted to go away into obscurity, although never fear, he does make appearances throughout this very run, perhaps more on that later. But basically, this run, again, establishes a new status quo. We're seeing Thor wearing the mantle of king, and he's kind of stepping away, at least in theory, from some of his costumed superheroics over on Midgard or Earth, but again, we still see him get pulled into the fray here and there. No, this run really concerns itself as Thor struggles to adjust to this role. Is he going to be a benevolent king or a king that rules based on kind of aggression and fear and stress? And we see a bit of both here, honestly, maybe kind of favoring the latter. At any rate, as we jump into this run, I will just say for newer Thor readers, do you need to read anything before picking up this omnibus and enjoying it? I'll honestly say I don't think so. Will previous runs on Thor be helpful to enjoy little Easter eggs or moments throughout? Yes, of course, but if you were going in as your first Thor read, perhaps like me, you were a fan of Donny Cates, you saw his name and you wanted to try something new, I honestly think you'd be totally fine picking this up. The team does a great job of bringing you up to speed on the matters that you need to know, and you can just buckle up for the ride. I do think that this is a very accessible omnibus, and that was something I was eager to talk about. Now, going into the stories within this omnibus, I have to say my favorites in this collection are actually the first story arc or two presented. That being said, there are still a ton of winners all throughout this omnibus. It should also be noted that Donny Cates did depart this book prior to the end of the run, and you definitely feel his departure. I'm not sure if this coincided with his accident he was in, but we didn't really get to see him finish out maybe the fullness of what he had planned for Thor. Maybe that's my speculation, but you do feel that a bit. So the ending of this omnibus is perhaps not the strongest in the book, but that does not mean it ended poorly. Honestly, this whole run was a ton of fun, and I'm going to look back on this as probably one of my favorite Thor runs. Going back into the story matter specifically though, this book starts with, in my mind, one of the best Thor stories I've ever read. This is the story concerning the Black Winter. Basically, Thor sees rumblings that things are starting to come apart in the universe. The realms are kind of worried, the tree is having some unsightly symptoms, and we find out that there is this malevolent presence that has kind of stalked existence for eons and eons, maybe part of what kind of tumbled the last universe, things like that, and it's this presence known as the Black Winter. It's really ominous and eerie, and we're not exactly sure what it is initially, but we have it kind of basically becoming a central conflict point for the character of Galactus, who is, of course, a huge Marvel villain and kind of celestial force of nature. He acts as kind of a check and balance for this universe, being the only survivor from the previous universe. Anyway, a really fascinating character, but we find out that he is trying to stop the Black Winter, and he needs the help of Thor, or at least that's what it appears like initially. However, before too long, we find out that the Black Winter can also show anyone how they are meant to die. And we learn that Galactus finds out that he will die at the hands of Thor. So Galactus is not really seeking aid as much as kind of is trying to eliminate Thor. There's an epic battle that ensues that ultimately culminates with an interesting twist wherein Thor agrees to help Galactus stop the Black Winter, and he is imbued with the powers cosmic, becoming the Herald of Thunder. Yes, Thor becomes one of Galactus's heralds. This was a really fun twist, and I like immediately before this we got to see appearances from a lot of other notable heralds of Galactus, including Silver Surfer, who is currently in his Silver Surfer Black state, another great work from, I believe, Donny Cates as well, so that was a really fun Easter egg and appearance there. But yes, this whole first story arc goes into Galactus and Thor going across the universe, trying to empower Galactus more than ever by basically consuming specific planets that are rich in the energy he needs to basically bulk him up to try to get the power to stop this force that's threatening to unravel the universe as they know it. This was just such a fun cosmic adventure, and it put Thor in a really unique spot. Here he is becoming king, maybe never stronger, never more powerful or having more authority, and yet he becomes a herald to Galactus, and yet he doesn't like being on a leash. In fact, he refuses to be subservient to Galactus, which leads to a lot of really interesting battles and conflicts throughout between those two characters. At the end of the story arc, we have kind of a reckoning for both Galactus, Thor, and the Black Winter, and we have a moment where Thor peaks and finds out how he will meet his end, and it looks like to be at the hands of Thanos, who is believed to be dead. This lends a really, really chilling kind of ticking clock mechanic at the back of this run and in the back of all of our minds, because now Thor is extremely worried the Mad Titan will return. At any rate, though, the powers that be stop the Black Winter, at least for now, and Thor does end Galactus, at least by all appearances. Again, a really striking story arc here, one of my favorites in this whole book. After that, we have a couple other smaller stories, but really the next big story arc is a story arc called Prey, and that's the next one I want to speak to today, as it was also one of my favorites in the book. I thought that this was a really novel twist as well, and a really, really fun use of Donald Blake. Now, if you are one of those new Thor readers that I mentioned earlier, you might be asking, who is Donald Blake? What does he mean to Thor? Essentially, the Cliff Notes version is early on in the Silver Age of comics when Stan Lee and co. created the Thor title. They didn't really make Thor as this kind of character who was kind of from myth and imbued with all these powers necessarily. It was a man who had kind of a limp, and he was walking with a cane, named Donald Blake. He finds this kind of sacred walking stick in a cave, and he finds that if he smashes it on the ground, it turns into Mjolnir, and if he's worthy to hold it, he gains all the powers of Thor. So it's kind of the character who becomes Thor as a costume vigilante early in the Silver Age. That continuity gets really interesting as they layer that, yes, Thor actually does exist, and somehow Donald Blake maybe channels that or something. But then what happens to Donald Blake? Who is Donald Blake? Is this really a punishment from Odin to humble Thor? Is he even a real person? And this has been something that has gone on for a while through many different runs. I know JMS has some interesting takes on that as well, and just many other writers. But Donald Blake is a character that has been in and out of the Thor mythos for some time. Obviously, the modern Thor really favors that he is this kind of mythological character who just is super powered and heroic and lives in Asgard but defends Midgard and all of that. Anyway, Donny Cates' spin on Donald Blake is one of my favorites. Basically, they treat it that Donald Blake was in this kind of other realm when he's not kind of walking around and Thor is not kind of in stasis or sleeping or whatever, when they're not sharing that form. Donald Blake is in this kind of blissful other reality that feels like, I don't know, 1950s Leave It to Beaver sitcom America. It's supposed to be idyllic and kind of pastoral, and it's just kind of his place where he can rest and kind of be kind of in existence, kind of not. But the wrinkle for this storyline Prey is that dimension got corrupted and there was monsters and he was trapped and he learned of what his existence looked like and how it was a shadow or some kind of trick by Odin, and he basically goes insane and he starts consuming the powers of the monsters and he just gets deranged and out of his mind, really clawing at the gilded cage, so to speak. Of course, this is all not known to Thor and his team, but Thor is dealing with his own struggles as king, and basically his advisors recommend that he take a rest of some kind. So he is going to summon Donald Blake into existence again and go into a kind of all-king, sort of all-father kind of rest. But basically when he does that, he finds himself trapped in this realm, which has become more or less a hellscape for him. He learns that Donald Blake has gone insane, and now he cannot escape this realm either. Meanwhile, Donald Blake is back in kind of the real world or real dimension, and he is empowered by all of these creatures he's kind of consumed, and again, he's unstable and out of his mind. And unless I'm mistaken, he's found a way to kind of consume the powers of all of these Asgardian figures, and he's going on a rampage. He's finding weapons and just trying to take out all of the Norse pantheon he can. Along the way, people and friends of Thor are trying to stop him, Thor's trying to escape, and it leads to some pretty epic conclusions. This was such a sinister story. It was insidious, it was creepy and eerie, and it had kind of a psychological thriller vibe. So much palpable tension throughout the scenes here. I absolutely loved it. It had me on edge, it was gripping, it was interesting, and tonally it was definitely a shift for a Thor story. It went away from kind of the high fantasy and into, again, that kind of dark, sinister, psychological thriller realm with kind of trappings of fantasy around it. And yeah, it just worked for me. I feel like Donny Cates really hit a sweet spot. The art here as well is really, really interesting and evocative and immersive, and I just think that Prey storyline was fantastic. There's one notable scene as well where Donald Blake tries to get back in the good graces of Jane Foster, who is now a Valkyrie, and it leads to a really uncomfortable kind of dinner date scenario where she suspects that he is not who he once was. And anyway, really, really fun stuff there. I'm not going to spoil every little detail of that, but it ends in a not so good place for Donald Blake. He ends up becoming Loki's prisoner, and he is basically given authority to punish Donald Blake for what he's done, and he essentially gives him the mantle of, kind of the King of Lies or whatever. Anyway, really fun stuff there. A really great story arc that I think is truly memorable. Between that and the Black Winter stuff at the beginning, this run was off to an amazing start. There are honestly so many incredible stories in this omnibus. I know I'm not going to be able to speak to them all. There's a whole storyline involving the hammer Mjolnir itself, which gets corrupted. You find out that there's an entity that was trapped in Mjolnir with that enchantment from Odin, and it gets corrupted and becomes evil. This almost reminded me of the Danger Room storyline from Astonishing X-Men, where this tool for our hero kind of becomes a sentient, malevolent villain. I thought that was really fun as well. We do have a Death of Odin kind of story arc that coincides with a kind of celebration issue for Thor, where we have a lot of other creators and guest illustrators, contributing parts of this massive milestone issue. I thought that was a really great arc as well, or storyline. We actually have Odin's soul kind of grafted to Mjolnir after that. Mjolnir gets a little bit broken and reconstituted, and then, Odin's kind of inside it. And from that point, we have Odin speaking to Thor. Before this, we also had a whole arc where Mjolnir could be wielded by just about anyone, and that's kind of ultimately what led to this whole hammer storyline. That was all a really fun part of this omnibus as well. We had some notable appearances again from Odin, as I've mentioned, from his mother, from his sister Angela, which was fun. Toward the back of this volume, we do eventually have the departure of Donny Cates, and we get more into what happens with Thanos. There's questions about, is he resurrected? What is he after? And toward the end of this omnibus, we have a storyline that involves Thanos, Doctor Doom, time travel, and a lot of Asgardians. This was a fun story as well. We find out who the parentage of Hela, or at least partially. I thought that was an interesting wrinkle as well. The guest artist on this, definitely a different vibe from a lot of the other art we have in this collection. A little more animated and heavily outlined, but still enjoyable. Again, the storylines toward the back of this book, perhaps not as strong or as gripping, but overall, still such a fun ride. And at the very end of the book, we end with both of the annuals, or at least material from them. These were fun as well. They definitely tagged up to the main run in different notable points, but still felt like special stand-apart issues. At the back of the book, we have a good collection of artistic-based extras. We have some character models, a big variant cover art gallery, some full page, some thumbnailized. Then we have some kind of pen and inks, more reproductions of original art here. And that really brings us to the end of this Thor by Cates and Klein Omnibus. Frankly, I really love this run a lot, and even looking at my timing on this video, I could have spoken about this book for twice as long and perhaps not even have covered every story I wanted to talk about. Perhaps this is a book I'll revisit in different forms on the channel to talk about it more, but yes, a really striking run that I genuinely had a lot of fun with. While it might not hit the highs of the Venom run by Cates and Stegman, I still think that this is a very, very worthwhile read for Marvel fans, and especially for Donny Cates fans out there. And now all that's left to do is to give this omnibus a grade. And as I'm about to give it a grade, I realize I didn't even talk about Banner of War, the epic Thor vs. Hulk story arc. Well, that one was fun as well, but for the Thor by Cates and Klein omnibus, the Comic Book Report is happy to give this book a B. This was a well above average read for me, some really notable story arcs here, including that Hulk one, which I cannot believe I forgot to mention. But yeah, the Black Winter, the Prey story arc, this is some really heavy-hitting Donny Cates material. A lot of fun Easter eggs from other runs of his, great artwork from Nick Klein, and a lot of others. A really memorable, fantastical, action-packed superhero book. But perhaps that's just my read on this omnibus. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this run by Cates and Klein in the comments section below. Are you planning to pick up this omnibus? Do you have it already? What other great Thor comic runs can you recommend? Let me know all about it in the comments. Again, a huge thank you to those at Organic Price Books for sending over this review copy in exchange for this honest review. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, those comments we talked about, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks, bye.